On this segment of Up Close and Personal, we have Nehassaiu Degannes and Hassiem Mohammed, cast members of the action-packed Three Musketeers, now playing at Cleveland Playhouse. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
Well, my name is Oshibania, and I represent Maxinow Entertainment, and we've been doing social media marketing in the Cleveland market since 2011. Thank you so much for this interview.
Of course, of course.
It's a pleasure to be here in the Zoom room with you.
So to me, it's like double your pleasure, double your fun this afternoon. So we'll get right into it. Ladies first. Nehassaiu, you act, teach, write, and recite poetry. For starters, your ancestry is from the Caribbean diaspora, Dominica.
You have done your research, yes. Thank you for that, Oshu. But yes, I often will always describe myself as Caribbean. My family is somewhat atypical. We actually come from a breadth of the Caribbean islands. For example, my father was from Grenada and my mother born and raised in Guyana, and I was born in Trinidad, and it branches out from there. But you're absolutely right. Dominica is one of my family's home islands. It's the island that my maternal grandfather was from, and one of my it's an island near and dear to my heart. And it sounds as if you've looked at some of my poems, and some of my poems are Dominica poems. So thank you for that.
Well, are you carrying the teaching torch for your ancestors?
Wow, in many ways I am. I mean, my mother was a gifted educator, dedicated much of her career to being a public school educator. And my great-grandfather in Dominica, he actually built a one-room schoolhouse on his land, and he became the first Black superintendent of schools on the island of Dominica. So yes, teaching runs through my bloodline, and I consider it an art form, right alongside acting and writing. And Hassiem popped off the screen there for a moment, but Hassiem, I was about to give you a shout out because I think as artists, we are always and often teaching, even if we're not quote unquote official teachers. And I know that Hassiem is also a gifted teaching artist, as well as teaching many of us through this process. Those of us who are newer to fight or a little rusty with our fight, Hassiem has been generous in how he has shared his skills with the entire ensemble and cast.
And to add to that, it's not your name part of your namesake means teaching? And
I've been told it means awaken the people. So that could be one interpretation of what it means to awaken folks, is to teach. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So Hassiem, you are an actor, writer, producer, director. At such a young age, you couldn't be more than 25 years.
Yeah.
No comment.
Bit of a jack of all trades. Yeah.
Well, you created a web series, Angels Unknown. What was the series about, and how many viewers did you have?
So Angels of Uptown, it's a web series that I wrote, produced during sort of the height of the pandemic. So the show follows three millennials who live in Uptown Manhattan as they sort of go on these escapades looking to protect and serve their community because they feel like the police aren't doing their jobs. So Upper Manhattan, where, Black and brown people have been displaced to over the years, crime is high, but the attention is not where it needs to be. And as a resident of Upper Manhattan, I've sort of experienced these things as well. So just sort of was writing from where I was at the time. Viewers, I'm not actually sure. I haven't really, I guess, put too much attention on like viewers. But if you go to our YouTube page, I'm sure it's all there.
Okay.
Per video is on there. So yeah, but we had supporters from all over the country, which is really dope. It was a great learning experience. It was my first time producing. It was my first time directing something of that magnitude. writing something of that magnitude. So for me, ultimately, it was a great learning experience, I'll say. Yeah.
Well, I see a Netflix deal in the future here, so maybe.
Listen, they want to come, I'm here. I ain't gonna turn them away.
Now, you're from South Carolina and you grew up with 6 sisters. Are you the only son?
Correct.
Did your sisters have anything to do with your special combat training skills?
So interestingly enough, I won't say I learned any combat from them, but almost all of us have trained in martial arts at some point. I think maybe only one of us hasn't. Yeah, I think maybe just only one of us hasn't trained in martial arts at some point. All of our dedication to it was different, of course. Probably myself and one of my older sisters, or 2 of my older sisters, took to it the most. But yeah, we've all dabbled.
Well, that's interesting. And what I actually meant was there a lot of rabble rousing as kids, jumping around, fighting and crazy and stuff like that. So, but that's interesting that martial arts, your sisters, a couple of your sisters have also trained in martial arts. In any event, though, you are the ideal talent for the lead role of a D'Artagnan. Tell us about the Society of American Fight Directors.
So the Society of American Fight Directors, the SAFD, is an organization dedicated to developing the craft of stage combat, right? And through the society, there are actors known as actor combatants can go through, can take workshops, classes, become a member of the SAFD themselves as they earn certifications in different weapon classes. For me, it has primarily been a resource, I would say. My mentor, Dale Gerard, is a fight master with the SAFD. He was, in fact, the youngest at the time, the youngest person to achieve the rank of fight master in the history of the SAFD. So for me, it's a community. It's a community. Everybody's just trying to learn, network, help each other out, and of course, fight.
Well, I know Ron Kenter is the fight director for the Three Musketeers. However, tell me about the associate fight director, Susanna Montoya Cantilla. Is she a badass or what?
Yeah. She is indeed a badass. And Nehassaiu was very gracious in uplifting me in this process. But I'm learning just as much from everyone else, to be honest. Susie being a primary example. She's incredible. Having a woman in that position, in my experience, is uncommon. And she does it with grace and power at the same time. Yeah, she's strong. She's front-footed. She knows what she's doing.
Yeah, I've been really grateful to have Susie be a part of this process. I was sharing this with her at opening night, our circle of toasts and uplifting the process, that she also has an amazing ability to tune in and to translate sometimes what an actor is attempting to express, or the internal story that the actor is crafting for the character. And because Susie and Rod work so well together and have such respect for each other, Susie has also been this really wonderful liaison or interpreter or translator, sometimes helping either the actor understand the nuances of a note that Rod is working with, or helping Rod understand the nuances of something that the actor might be struggling with, right? And so that has been invaluable. And as I was about to call you D'Artagnan, as Hassiem said, right? I mean, to have a woman in that position is rare. And I think for this particular production and this particular ensemble, given the fact that the casting has even been sort of blown wide, expectations around which genders can play which roles, right? Which races can play which roles, like who can embody and be the vessel for this storytelling. It's been really exciting to have Susie be a part of this team. Yeah.
Well, Nehassaiu, you are cast in the lead role of Milady the Winter. Now, Emily Kawachu became the first African American cast as Christine in the Phantom of the Opera. The Three Musketeers is the second production I have seen at Cleveland Playhouse this season where their lead roles have been people of color. Mariah Burks was cast as Antigone in March. What are your thoughts on historic roles and the significance of representation with people of color?
Wow, that's a big question. I'll try to answer it somewhat succinctly. Which door do I want to open, right? I mean, there's so many doors into this room. Exciting question. Well, what I'd like to remind us, and I think I'll just stay with the two examples that you've offered, right? In terms of Antigone and the play that we're doing. Alexandre Dumas, as we know, was a Black man. His father was a Black man. I started to reread, I've read the original, I started to reread it as part of this process. And in the first few paragraphs, D'Artagnan is described, his face is long and brown, and he is from Gascony, right? And one could say, well, you know, brown meant different things at that time to Dumas, and it may have, but in Dumas' original, he also goes to great lengths to describe Milady as very fair and blonde. So he was very clear about the descriptions that he was giving his characters. And I think in Dumas' original, Milady being fair and blonde, I think Dumas was also in his own way, this is opinion now, but informed opinion, perhaps inverting the notion of what was the emblem of female purity, right? Milady is from Britain, her features are very sort of Nordic, and she's sort of like the original Ice Queen, right? So I think it's really exciting that Cleveland Playhouse's production reclaims, right, the Blackness of the story and reclaims that Black and brown people throughout history have been participating in crafting these stories, telling these stories, right? And very often these stories are whitewashed. Even if we move to Antigone, this notion that the Mediterranean world, that the Greek classical world looked, quote unquote, what we call white is a myth. I mean, even recently, and I'm now paraphrasing some research that I read, even recently, the notion that all of the Greek and Roman statues were white, the marble that was used was white. But what we've learned recently is that those statues were actually painted and the paint has worn off. So again, we've inherited this narrative that white somehow was the universal ideal, which isn't true. That's a construct. And I think it's really exciting that we can disrupt that construct. And I'll go even further. If we continue to tell these stories and uphold this notion that only white bodies are capable of being the vessels for these stories, that is a myth. How does a young white person whose family has been in the Americas for 400 years have more access to Chekhov, right, than a Black person whose family who has been in the Americas for 400 years? Like, what is it about whiteness that somehow gives you greater access to, quote unquote, this a classical canon, more so than a Black body? So I think it's really exciting that we're disrupting that, overturning that, unpacking that. And there are many more doorways into the universal. White is not universal. White is a construct. The universal is humanity. And all of these human vessels are a portal to the universal.
Well, you're kind of like getting into the area to me of critical race theory, which is so important. But I don't want to go down there. Okay, we want to get back to the Three Musketeers, because we can go on and on and on about the reasoning behind, the trying to suffocate the education of history. But Nehassaiu Laura Kepley's philosophy of identity conscious casting and diversity. And she's been responsible for a lot of the diversity. How was your experience working with Laura Kepley, the director for the Three Musketeers?
I know you directed that question to me, and I'm happy to lend my voice to answering it. But I also just gave a lengthy answer to the last question. So I'd love to toss the ball to my castmate Hassiem and then perhaps come back and answer that. Yeah.
I'll catch it. It's been great working with Laura. It truly has. So, elephant in the room, Laura's a white woman, right? Who has done this identity conscious casting. And for me, I feel like this is the most diverse cast I've ever been a part of. And I truly mean in like the true sense of the word, right? Because sometimes we'll have casts that are black and white and we'll call it diverse. But to me, that's it's kind of like scratching the surface of diversity. But in terms of gender, race, ethnic backgrounds, like we truly have a diverse cast. And so I'm proud to be a part of that. And I'm very grateful to Laura for bringing us all together. And the thing that really impresses me with Laura is that she is very openly a work in progress, right? And I really say that as a compliment, because the American theater, as Nehassaiu kind of alluded to, has always been tailored to white bodies, right? Historically tailored to white bodies. And so as a white artistic director, really, she could choose to just continue in that. She could have chosen to continue that path. I mean, I got wind that some audience members the other day, they were like, oh, I think they're trying to like modernize the show. And, you know, they had some opinions about some of the casting and some of the language. So I have a lot of respect for Laura pushing back against the tradition of the American theater in that way. The theater has provided for us affinity spaces. They really based on whatever we require, right? They have provided prayer rooms. I'm Muslim, so like that's something I personally have taken advantage of that I have not had access to anywhere else that I've worked ever. We have access to counseling, right? And those are the non-physical. Obviously, we're in a very physical show, so we also have physical therapy and massage and that kind of thing. But the non-physical things that are just to help us as our who we are navigate this world, this play, it's really been a gift. And so, yeah, working with Laura has been great. Yeah, I can pass the ball back.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your use of the phrase "work in progress" because I think that is an affirmation, and I think that's just sort of can be one of the elements of this art form, right? That is intrinsic to it, but is not always fully embraced, right? I mean, theater is ephemeral. We're always beginning again. We're always crafting something out of seemingly nothing. And how exciting to embrace that element of this craft, of this vocation. And yes, and in a leadership position, right, at the helm of the first regional theater in this country, and at the helm of this season in the wake of what we are calling like the Great Reckoning, right, in American theater, and not just to put a Band-Aid on it, not just to pay lip service, not just to kind of hold on and wait for this quote unquote trend to pass, right, but to really seize this moment to say, what does it mean to be inclusive? What does it really mean to be diverse, right? As Hassiem has said, what does it really mean to do this work, right? And to practice it and to evolve what that practice can mean. And speaking for myself, I had the pleasure of working with Laura in 2018 on Sweat, which was a show that was on my bucket list. I played Cynthia. Yeah. And I was so excited to be a part of that process. And it's really exciting to return almost, it's like 3.5 years later, and just to see the growth and the change at CPH in that time and to benefit from that hard work, right? I mean, that work takes investment and to experience what those investments can yield. And I'm so grateful because Three Musketeers is such a large cast. It's such a big show with so many moving parts. But the fact that we have, through our process, we instituted a practice, an ensemble practice of checking in and checking out at the beginning and the end of every rehearsal, which again, rehearsal time is precious, especially in a show with fights, right? Especially in a show this large. But that has yielded such an ensemble sense of connection and care and safety, where we can all be vulnerable and continue to take the courageous risks that the story demands of us. And, yeah. Okay.
Well,
Yeah, and I would love.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I would love to add that. You made me think about, your question was about Laura as an artistic director, and I think that a lot of times artistic directors are kind of the face of their respective institution, and it's like that's not necessarily how the institution is managed. Right? So typically, it's like artistic director and managing director are like on the same tier of sort of like a tree, whatever the hierarchy of the company is, right? But then they also have a board, right, who they need to appease. And a lot of these boards, a lot of these theaters, right, are not diverse, are not inclusive. I'm not talking about CPH. I've not met any board members here. Just speaking generally to say that, like, when Nehassaiu was saying, like, to work against like these power shows, like it's the fact that, you were here 3.5 years ago and have noticed a difference. It's like, surely that work is more than just Laura saying, oh, I'm just gonna change things. Like it's work on her part. And so I appreciate the work that Laura has done. Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is Laura Kepley's last season with Cleveland Playhouse. She will be missed. So it's interesting to see who's going to step into those shoes. Well, we're winding down here. Spoiler alert. We'll start with you, Hassiem. What can we expect when we take our seats and the lights are dimmed and the production begins for the Three Musketeers? That okay.
I'm gonna be honest. I'll try to figure out how to answer. Like, expect to be blown away. Special production. I texted a friend of mine who has his hand in producing in the New York City theater scene. I was like, we have a special show. And this was like in the second week of rehearsal. I reached out to him and I was like, we have something special here. Yeah, expect to be blown away. I mean, I like to describe it as like a musical that instead of breaking into song, we break into fights. You have that spectacle. I remember in school I was told, oh, like for musicals, when words fail, characters sing, right? Or when words fail, characters dance. It's like, well, when words fail for us, we duel. Rod Pinter, Susie, Kinchia, Mark Rose, like they have done an amazing job with the fight choreography and helping us set this piece. And we have some really, really dope fight sequences. I think it's like 10 fights in under 2 hours. There's a fight in the first 5 minutes of the show, and there's a fight in the last 5 minutes of the show. So from beginning to end, it doesn't stop. The show is high paced, so expect to never settle, right? There are maybe like 2 to 3 scenes maximum where kind of the dust settles a little bit, and then we just blow the roof off again. So expect high pace, expect a lot of expect a lot of talent. Yeah. And expect to, I know, I read, Laura did an interview and she described it as like a journey of friendship, of love. So expect that as well. It is D'Artagnan's story, and I hope that other people take this away, that it's truly like an ensemble-driven production.
And Nehassaiu, your thoughts? What can we expect?
What would I add to that? I would echo and affirm and say that, yeah, a story of friendship, of love, heartbreak, and what people do to survive.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for this interview, Nehassaiu and Hassiem.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you, Oshupa.
You're more than welcome, and break a leg.
Thank you.